The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Rebecca Thornton's pale skin as she stumbled through the rugged canyon, her torn dress catching on sharp rocks and thorny brush. 3 days since the stagecoach attack, her water gone, hope fading with each labored step. In the distance, a silhouette appeared, tall, imposing, unmistakably Apache. Koa-Tay watched the white woman, noting her determination despite obvious fear. His people called him Shadow Walker for good reason, yet something in her defiant posture gave him pause. He had tracked the raiders for vengeance, not to find a lost teacher with fire in her eyes and books in her satchel. What neither could imagine was how this chance meeting would forever alter the course of 2 lives from worlds that had only known bloodshed between them. Could a warrior who knew only battle find peace in the arms of a woman who had never known a man's touch? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. You'll regret this decision, Rebecca. The territories are no place for a proper Boston lady. Rebecca Thornton carefully folded the crisp white blouse and placed it in her trunk, refusing to meet her mother's disapproving gaze. The morning sunlight streamed through the lace curtains of her childhood bedroom, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air between mother and daughter. I'm hardly proper by Boston standards, Mother. Rebecca tucked a wayward strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. And at 26, I believe I've earned the right to determine my own path. Mrs. Thornton sighed dramatically. Unmarried at your age is unfortunate enough without adding frontier schoolteacher to your list of peculiarities. Rebecca's fingers traced the leather binding of her journal before placing it atop her clothing. This journal, a parting gift from her sister Emily, would be her confidant in the lonely days ahead. She opened it briefly, admiring the blank pages that awaited her thoughts and observations. The Arizona Territory needs educators, Rebecca said firmly. Children there deserve the same opportunities as those born to privilege in Boston. Savages and miners' children, her mother muttered. Rebecca closed the trunk with a decisive click. All children, Mother. That's what matters. Later that afternoon, Emily helped Rebecca into the carriage that would take her to the westbound train. Unlike their mother, Emily's eyes shone with admiration. Write everything down, Emily whispered, pressing Rebecca's hand. Every mountain, every sunset, every interesting person you meet. I will, Rebecca promised, patting the journal secured in her satchel. Though I doubt anyone truly interesting would venture so far from civilization. How wrong she would prove to be. The stagecoach journey's final leg proved more grueling than Rebecca had anticipated. For days of endless jolting across increasingly rugged terrain had left her body aching and her fine traveling dress coated in a permanent layer of dust. Yet with each passing mile her spirit soared higher. This wild country spoke to something deep within her, a yearning for purpose that Boston drawing rooms could never fulfill. Injun's been restless these parts, announced the retired cavalry officer sitting across from her. Colonel Hargrove, as he had introduced himself, seemed determined to terrify the schoolmarm with tales of frontier dangers. Apaches are the worst of the lot. Savages, the whole tribe. Rebecca met his gaze steadily. I found, Colonel, that people seldom warrant such broad judgments. The missionary couple sharing their bench nodded appreciatively. The woman, Mrs. Porter, leaned forward. Our experience with the native peoples has been quite different. Many are curious about our ways and eager to learn. Colonel Hargrove scoffed. Eager to learn where to strike with their knives, more likely. Rebecca turned toward the window, ending the unpleasant conversation. The landscape had transformed into a breathtaking tableau of red rock formations and vast blue sky. She retrieved her journal, recording impressions with quick, decisive strokes. May 15th, 1885, the land grows wilder by the hour. I've never witnessed such colors. Rust-red cliffs against turquoise sky. This morning we passed a dry riverbed where cacti stood like silent sentinels. Everything here demands strength to survive. Perhaps that's why I already love it. This country asks no less of me than I ask of myself. When the stagecoach stopped at a remote outpost for fresh horses, Rebecca stretched her legs outside the station. A group of children, some clearly mixed heritage, watched her curiously from the shade of a cottonwood. Rebecca smiled and reached into her satchel, retrieving a well-worn copy of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. The children approached cautiously as she opened the book. "Would you like to hear a story?" she asked. Their eager nods needed no translation. Soon she was surrounded by attentive faces as she read, using different voices for each character. She didn't notice the Native American woman watching from the shadows, nor the subtle approval in her dark eyes. When the driver called for passengers to return, one small girl tugged Rebecca's sleeve. "Will you come back to read more, miss?" Rebecca's heart swelled. "I'm going to teach at a school near Fort Whipple. Perhaps you could visit me there." The girl nodded solemnly. "I will find you." As the stagecoach rumbled back onto the trail, Rebecca felt a certainty that had eluded her in Boston. This was where she belonged, among those who hungered for knowledge as she once had. The unknown path ahead held no terror, only promise. She was unaware that promises, like trails, can lead to unexpected destinations. Dawn painted the Apache camp in amber hues as Koa-Tay crested the ridge overlooking his people's temporary settlement. 23 lodges stood in the protected valley, thin wisps of cooking smoke rising in the still morning air. He paused, fingers instinctively touching the eagle feather secured in his long black hair, a token from his first battle, 15 summers past. Koa-Tay's younger brother, Nanto, spotted him first and jogged up the slope to meet him. "The council awaits your report," Nanto said, falling into step beside him. "Have you found sign of the raiders?" "They move like coyotes through our hunting grounds," Koa-Tay replied, his deep voice steady despite 4 days of hard tracking. 6 men, maybe 7. They struck the Manning family's homestead 3 days ago. Nanto's expression darkened. "The family that trades fairly with us? Were there survivors?" "The father and young son escaped. The mother was taken." Koa-Tay's jaw tightened. "These are the same men who attacked our hunting party last moon. I found their distinctive boot prints." In the center of camp, 5 elders sat in a semicircle outside the council lodge. Chief Nilchi, his weathered face impassive beneath silver-streaked hair, nodded for Koa-Tay to join them. Though only 35 winters old, Koa-Tay had earned his place in such discussions through proven wisdom and unmatched skill as a tracker. "Tell us what you have learned, Shadow Walker," the chief said, using Koa-Tay's earned name. Koa-Tay described the raiders' movements in precise detail. Their camp locations, the livestock they'd stolen, their apparent heading toward the stage road. The elders listened without interruption, their faces growing more troubled with each word. "They are moving between 2 worlds," Koa-Tay concluded, "attacking white settlers, then retreating to our lands knowing the army will blame Apache for their crimes." Old Tashin, keeper of tribal history, leaned forward. "This pattern brings danger to our people. The white soldiers look for any excuse to move against us." "I will continue tracking them," Koa-Tay said. "Their next target appears to be the stage road near Dragon's Spine Ridge." Chief Nilchi studied him. "You speak of this raid as if it has not yet happened. The signs suggest they are preparing, not that they have already struck. And you wish to prevent this attack?" There was a note of caution in the chief's voice. Koa-Tay chose his words carefully. "I wish to protect our people. If these raiders continue, the army will move against us, not them." What he did not say, what he need not say, was that preventing the raid might also spare innocent lives. 5 summers had passed since Koa-Tay's wife, Estzen, had been killed by soldiers during a mistaken raid on their previous camp. The pain had hardened within him like amber, preserving both his grief and his desire for justice, not blind vengeance. "Go then," the chief decided, "but observe only. Do not engage unless our people are directly threatened." As Koa-Tay left the council, his brother fell into step beside him once more. "You did not mention that the Manning woman reminded you of Estzen," Nanto said quietly. Koa-Tay's steps faltered briefly. "That is not why I track these men." "No," Nanto's tone held no judgment, only concern. You have not slept in the camp for more than 2 nights since Eston was taken from us. The people speak of it. Let them speak, Koa-Tay said, reaching his lodge and ducking inside to gather supplies. I serve the tribe by using the skills the Creator gave me. Nanto watched as his brother expertly packed dried meat, extra moccasins, and weapons. The living still need you, brother. Not just the memory of the dead. Koa-Tay paused, meeting his brother's gaze. I know where I am needed most right now. Within an hour, he was back on the raiders' trail, moving like his namesake, a shadow across the land. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, but Koa-Tay read the subtle signs with practiced ease. Displaced rocks, bent grass, a cigarette but from the white man's tobacco. As twilight approached, he reached a vantage point overlooking the stage road. In the distance, dust billowed behind an approaching stagecoach. Closer, hidden in a brushy ravine, he detected movement. The raiders, preparing their ambush. Koa-Tay notched an arrow, calculating distance and wind. He could take 1, perhaps 2 before they realized where death came from. But the chief's orders had been clear. Observe, do not engage. With iron discipline, he lowered his bow and watched as the stagecoach rumbled closer to its fate. The first gunshot cracked the afternoon stillness like lightning splitting a cloudless sky. Rebecca jerked awake from her light doze, momentarily disoriented as the stagecoach lurched violently. Indians, bellowed Colonel Hargrove, fumbling for his pistol. Raiders, the driver corrected from above, his voice tight with fear as he whipped the horses to greater speed. More shots followed. The missionary's wife screamed as a bullet splintered the wooden frame inches from her head. Rebecca pressed herself against the seat, heart hammering against her ribs, as the stagecoach careened dangerously around a bend in the road. They're gaining! The driver's shout was followed by a sickening grunt. The stagecoach swerved sharply, tipped onto 2 wheels, and for one suspended moment, Rebecca felt herself floating. Then came the impact. She was thrown violently from the pitching vehicle, her body tumbling down a rocky slope. Pain exploded in her shoulder, her hip, her head. The world spun in sickening circles before darkness claimed her. When consciousness returned, Rebecca found herself sprawled on hard-packed earth, the metallic taste of blood in her mouth. Above her, the broken wheel of the stagecoach protruded from a tangle of wood and leather like the spoke of some terrible, shattered star. Silence pressed against her ears where moments before there had been shouting and gunfire. She tried to rise but fell back with a gasp as pain lanced through her left arm. Not broken, she determined after careful testing, but badly bruised. Her dress was torn at the sleeve, revealing a bleeding scrape from shoulder to elbow. "Hello?" she called, her voice emerging as barely more than a whisper. She swallowed and tried again. "Is anyone there?" No answer came except the mournful cry of a distant hawk. Fighting waves of dizziness, Rebecca managed to sit upright. The stagecoach lay on its side 20 feet up the slope, one wheel completely shattered. No movement came from within or around it. Of the horses and driver, she saw no sign. "Mrs. Porter? Colonel?" she called more strongly now. "Anyone?" The silence that answered held a finality that sent cold fear coursing through her. With trembling fingers, Rebecca checked herself for serious injuries, finding only cuts and bruises, painful but not life-threatening. Her satchel remained miraculously slung across her body, though her trunk and other belongings were nowhere to be seen. Stumbling to her feet, Rebecca climbed laboriously back up to the stagecoach. The scene that greeted her there stole her breath. The driver lay half-buried beneath the overturned vehicle, his vacant eyes staring at the cloudless sky. Inside, Colonel Hargrove sprawled awkwardly, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Rebecca pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. The porters were gone. Taken or fled, she couldn't tell. The quiet gambler who had ridden with them was also missing, along with any luggage that might have held supplies. "This can't be happening," she whispered, backing away from the gruesome tableau. The rational part of her mind, the part that had convinced her parents she could manage alone in the territories, began to assess her situation. She was stranded in hostile country, miles from the nearest settlement, with limited supplies and no weapon save a small folding knife in her satchel. Rebecca took a shuddering breath and opened her bag, tallying her resources. The journal and pencil, a nearly empty canteen, the knife, a small sewing kit, a handkerchief and 3 books, her Bible, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and a primer for teaching reading. Not exactly survival equipment. The sun was beginning its westward descent. In a few hours, darkness would claim the landscape, bringing with it whatever predators, animal or human, prowled these wilds. "Think, Rebecca," she murmured, forcing back rising panic. "Which direction is Fort Whipple?" She studied the surrounding terrain, trying to orient herself based on the sun's position and what little she remembered from maps studied before her journey. West, she decided. The settlement lay west, beyond the red mesa visible in the distance. With one last glance at the wreckage, and a whispered prayer for the souls of the fallen, Rebecca adjusted her satchel, straightened her torn dress, and began walking. Each step sent pain radiating through her bruised body, but she pushed forward, driven by the simple mathematics of survival. Stay here and certainly die, or walk and possibly live. As the shadows lengthened across the rugged landscape, Rebecca didn't notice the subtle signs of being watched, didn't sense the dark eyes that tracked her increasingly erratic path from the ridge above. The Koa-Tay arrived at the stagecoach wreckage as the last crimson light faded from the western sky. He knelt beside the vehicle, running his fingers along the splintered wood and bullet holes. The attack had been swift, professional, not the work of impulsive thieves but of men accustomed to violence. From his deerskin pouch, he removed a smooth tracking stone, a tool passed down from his grandfather, its surface worn from generations of use. Placing it on his palm, he closed his eyes briefly, centering himself in the space between daylight and darkness when signs spoke most clearly. Opening his eyes, he began to read the aftermath. 2 men dead, others taken captive. Drag marks showed where bodies had been pulled to horses. A woman had been thrown clear of the wreckage, her smaller footprints distinct in a patch of soft earth. Those prints wandered away westward, becoming increasingly unsteady. Koa-Tay's jaw tightened. The woman was heading deeper into Apache territory, but away from water and shelter. At night, the desert's temperature would plummet. Without proper knowledge of the land, she would not survive until morning. He faced a choice: continue tracking the raiders or follow the lone woman. The raiders were his assigned target, the immediate threat to his people. Yet something about those solitary footprints tugged at him, their determination, perhaps, or the folly of their chosen direction. She may have seen the raiders clearly, he reasoned aloud, justifying his decision. Information that could help my people. The truth, which he acknowledged only to himself, was simpler. He could not leave a defenseless person to die alone in the wilderness, even if that person came from the world that had taken Eston from him. Following the woman's trail proved easy, even in the gathering darkness. She walked with purpose at first, then began to weave as exhaustion and disorientation set in. Twice she had stopped to rest, once kneeling beside a barrel cactus as if considering whether it might provide water. At a high point on a ridge, Koa-Tay caught sight of her silhouette against the dusky purple horizon, a slim figure moving with stubborn determination despite her obvious fatigue. Her dress, once fine by white standards, was torn and dust-covered. She clutched something to her chest, not a weapon, but some kind of bag. Koa-Tay circled ahead, moving with the silent efficiency that had earned him his name. He positioned himself on an outcropping where he could observe her more closely without being seen. As she passed below, he noted her matted chestnut hair, the dried blood on her temple, and the set of her jaw that spoke of resolve rather than surrender. A teacher, he remembered the raiders saying as they'd planned the ambush. They'd been specific about taking a woman teacher alive, a detail that had struck him as odd even then. Now, watching her stumble forward with a schoolbook still clutched in her hand, the puzzle deepened. Night fell completely, bringing a bone-deep chill to the desert air. The woman huddled beneath an overhang, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth. From his position, Koa-Tay could see what she could not: a mountain lion's fresh tracks circling her chosen shelter. He notched an arrow, prepared to defend her should the predator return. Through the long hours of darkness, he maintained his vigil, watching as she occasionally startled awake, her fear palpable even from a distance. Before dawn, she resumed her journey, though her steps now faltered badly. When she stumbled to her knees for the third time and struggled to rise, Koa-Tay knew he could delay no longer. She had reached the point where thirst, exposure, and exhaustion would soon claim her. He descended from his vantage point, moving deliberately to intercept her path. When she crested a small rise and saw him standing there, tall, impassive, adorned with the feather and beads that marked him as a warrior, her eyes widened with a complex mixture of terror and resignation. Her hand moved to her satchel as if seeking a weapon, but exhaustion finally claimed her. She swayed once, eyes rolling back, and collapsed into the red dust of the trail. Koa-Tay approached cautiously, alert for any sign of deception. But her unconsciousness was genuine. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 25 summers, with a face that, beneath the dirt and scratches, held a quiet determination even in repose. He knelt beside her, checking her pulse with practiced fingers. Her heartbeat fluttered like a trapped bird, rapid but weakening. Without water and shelter, she would not last another hour in the strengthening morning heat. With a decisive movement, Koa-Tay lifted her limp form into his arms. The raiders would have to wait. First, he would save this woman's life, then learn why they had wanted her so badly. Rebecca surfaced slowly from unconsciousness, aware first of shade cooling her face, then of something damp pressed against her forehead. She tried to speak but managed only a dry rasp. "Drink," commanded a deep voice. A water-filled canteen touched her cracked lips. Rebecca drank greedily until the vessel was pulled away. "Slowly," the voice admonished, "or you become sick." Memory flooded back, the stagecoach, the attack, her desperate trek. And then, an Apache warrior standing in her path. Rebecca's eyes flew open, her body tensing to flee. She found herself lying beneath a rocky overhang, its shadow providing relief from the brutal sun. Beside her knelt the warrior she'd glimpsed before collapsing. Up close, his features were sharper than she'd imagined. High cheekbones, obsidian eyes, a scar running along his jawline. The eagle feather in his hair marked him as someone of importance. Rebecca scrambled backward until her shoulders pressed against stone. "Stay away," she warned, though her parched voice barely carried. The warrior regarded her impassively, then extended the canteen once more. "Drink or die. Your choice." Rebecca's eyes darted to her satchel, lying just beyond reach. The warrior followed her gaze and pushed the bag toward her with one foot, watching as she clutched it protectively. "I have no interest in your belongings," he said, his English accented but clear. Thirst overrode fear. Rebecca accepted the canteen, noting it wasn't hers. Her own lay empty in her satchel. This one was crafted of animal hide, decorated with intricate beadwork. The water within tasted faintly of minerals but was cool and revitalizing. "Why are you helping me?" she asked between careful sips. "You saw the men who attacked the stagecoach," he replied. "I tracked these men. They weren't Indians, Apache," Rebecca corrected herself. "They wore bandanas over their faces, but their leader had a cavalry officer's bearing." Interest flickered in the warrior's eyes. "You noticed much for someone running for her life." "I'm observant by nature," Rebecca said, lowering the canteen. "I'm a teacher. My name is Rebecca Thornton." The warrior didn't immediately respond. Instead, he checked the position of the sun, now high overhead. "We cannot stay here. This place is exposed." "I need to reach Fort Whipple," Rebecca insisted. "There's a school waiting for me." Fort Whipple is 5 days' walk, across Apache land and through raider territory. He gestured to her torn dress and battered condition. "You would not survive one day." Fear knotted Rebecca's stomach. "Are you taking me prisoner?" The warrior's expression hardened. "If I wanted you dead or captive, you would be already." I am not like your people who kill women and children. The rebuke stung, especially as Rebecca recognized its essential truth. Stories of atrocities committed by both sides in the ongoing conflicts were numerous, though newspapers in Boston seldom mentioned those perpetrated by whites. I apologize, she said quietly. Thank you for saving my life. May I know your name? He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing some internal decision. I am called Koa-Tay. My people name me Shadow Walker. Rebecca nodded, filing away this information. Where will you take me, if not to Fort Whipple? There is a trading post 2 days north. The owner, Mackenzie, deals fairly with all people. He will help you reach your destination. Relief washed through her, followed quickly by uncertainty. 2 days with this imposing stranger through unknown wilderness seemed a daunting prospect. Yet what choice did she have? Can we start today? She asked, attempting to stand. Dizziness immediately overwhelmed her, and she would have fallen if Koa-Tay hadn't caught her arm in a firm grip. You are weak from the sun and no water, he stated matter-of-factly. Rest today. We travel at dusk when it is cooler. Rebecca sank back down, acknowledging the wisdom of his words even as frustration gnawed at her. She reached for her satchel, drawing comfort from the familiar weight of her journal. Koa-Tay watched with mild curiosity as she withdrew the leather-bound book and a pencil. You write even now? I promised my sister I would record everything, Rebecca explained, opening to a fresh page. It helps me make sense of things. Koa-Tay's expression remained unreadable, but he nodded once before moving to the edge of their shelter to scan the horizon. Rebecca watched him for a moment, then bent over her journal. May 18th, 1885. I scarcely know how to describe the events of the past day. Our stagecoach attacked, poor Mr. Jenkins and the colonel killed, the others taken or fled. I would surely have perished in this merciless wilderness had I not been found by an Apache warrior called Koa-Tay. He seems neither the bloodthirsty savage of Colonel Hargrove's warnings nor the noble innocent of romantic Eastern novels. He is simply a man. Dangerous, certainly, but also capable of compassion. He has shared his water when mine was gone and promises to guide me to safety. I find myself with no choice but to trust him, though everything I've been taught warns against it. They traveled through the lingering twilight, Koa-Tay setting a pace that challenged Rebecca's still weakened state but remained within her capabilities. The landscape transformed in the gentle evening light, harsh reds softening to purple, shadows lengthening across stone formations that resembled sleeping giants. This land is beautiful, Rebecca remarked, breaking a silence that had stretched for over an hour. Koa-Tay glanced back at her. You see it in the cool evening. Try saying this when the sun stands overhead. Even then, she insisted, it has a power that's missing from the manicured gardens of Boston. Something almost like amusement flickered across his face. The land does not care if you find it beautiful or ugly. It simply is. As full darkness descended, Koa-Tay led them to a protected hollow between two large boulders. We rest here, he announced, dropping his small pack. Rebecca sank gratefully onto a flat rock, massaging her aching feet through her impractical boots. Koa-Tay gathered brush with practiced efficiency, arranging it for a small fire. Is that safe? Rebecca asked. The fire, won't it attract attention? Cold night brings more danger than small fire, he replied, striking sparks with flint and steel. Cougars, wolves, they fear fire. And other people? Koa-Tay looked up, meeting her eyes across the kindling flames. Raiders rarely travel at night. They fear Apache. With good reason, it seems, Rebecca observed, watching his capable hands arrange the fire. Once the flames were established, Koa-Tay produced strips of dried meat from his pack. He offered several pieces to Rebecca, who accepted them gratefully. Thank you, she said, then hesitated before adding, how do you say thank you in your language? Koa-Tay's eyebrows rose slightly. Ahihi, Rebecca repeated carefully. Your accent is strange but understandable, he acknowledged. Encouraged, Rebecca pointed to the fire. And what is your word for fire? Ka. For the next several minutes, Rebecca requested and repeated Apache words for basic elements of their surroundings: water, stone, sky, stars. Koa-Tay provided them with increasing interest, occasionally correcting her pronunciation. "Why do you wish to learn these words?" he finally asked. Rebecca considered her answer carefully. "Understanding begins with language. I believe all people have value and wisdom to share, but without words, we remain strangers. Many white people learn our words only to twist them into false promises," Koa-Tay replied, his tone hardening. "I'm not here to make promises," Rebecca said simply. "Only to teach children, any children who wish to learn." Koa-Tay studied her across the flames. "You would teach Apache children?" "If their parents permitted it, yes. Knowledge belongs to everyone." He fell silent, turning his attention to the night sky. Rebecca sensed she had surprised him and decided not to press further. Instead, she retrieved The Adventures of Tom Sawyer from her satchel, its familiar weight comforting in her hands. Koa-Tay noticed the book. "You carry this instead of more water or food," he observed. "It must hold great medicine." Rebecca smiled slightly. "Not medicine, but stories. Would you like to hear one?" When he didn't object, she opened to a dog-eared page and began to read aloud, her voice carrying softly in the night air. She chose the scene where Tom tricks others into whitewashing the fence, infusing the characters with distinct voices. At first, Koa-Tay maintained an impassive expression, but as she continued, she noticed him leaning forward slightly, drawn into the tale despite himself. When she paused to rest her voice, he asked, "This boy, Tom, he is considered clever among your people?" "He's fictional, imaginary," Rebecca explained. "But yes, his cleverness is admired, though his aunt tries to curb his mischief. In my tribe, such a boy would be recognized early for his cunning," Koa-Tay said. "He would be trained by elders to use his mind for hunting or perhaps medicine." "What were you recognized for as a child?" Rebecca asked, sensing an opening into his guarded world. Koa-Tay's expression remained neutral, but he answered, "Tracking, moving silently, reading signs others missed." He paused. "My father saw this when I was 7 summers old. He taught me until he joined the ancestors." "And now you're teaching your own children these skills?" she ventured. "I have no children," he replied flatly. "My wife was killed 5 summers ago during an army attack on our winter camp." Rebecca's heart constricted. "I'm so sorry." "Your sorrow changes nothing," he said, though without bitterness. "Eston walks in the spirit world now." He rose abruptly, effectively ending the conversation. "Sleep. I will keep watch first." As Rebecca settled onto her makeshift bed of pine boughs, she realized she had glimpsed, however briefly, the man behind the warrior's mask. In the soft glow of firelight, watching him scan the darkness beyond their camp, she felt the first stirrings of something beyond mere gratitude for her rescue. A curiosity about who Koa-Tay truly was beneath the carefully maintained distance. Sleep came slowly as she wondered if he felt the same curiosity about her. By midday of their second day together, Rebecca's strength was failing. The morning had begun promisingly enough. A quick breakfast of dried berries from Koa-Tay's provisions, then steady progress across increasingly rocky terrain. But as the sun climbed higher, beating down with merciless intensity, Rebecca felt a creeping weakness in her limbs, a haziness clouding her thoughts. "We must rest," she finally admitted, sinking onto a boulder. "Just for a moment." Koa-Tay turned to study her with narrowed eyes. "You are flushed." He approached and, without asking permission, pressed a calloused hand to her forehead. "Fever begins." "I'm fine," Rebecca insisted, though the world had begun to tilt alarmingly around her. "Just the heat." "Show me your arm," he commanded. Rebecca hesitated, then slowly pulled back her torn sleeve. The scrape she'd sustained during the stagecoach crash had transformed into an angry red wound, with ominous streaks extending toward her shoulder. Koa-Tay's expression tightened. "Blood poison. We cannot reach the trading post before it worsens." Fear clutched at Rebecca's heart. She'd seen blood poisoning before, A stable boy in Boston had died screaming from it after a seemingly minor injury. What can we do? Instead of answering directly, Koa-Tay scanned the surrounding landscape with experienced eyes. There is a place nearby. Good water, shelter. We go there now. Rebecca tried to stand but swayed dangerously. Without comment, Koa-Tay took her satchel and slung it across his own shoulder, then offered his arm for support. Pride warred briefly with necessity before Rebecca accepted his help. The nearby place proved to be over an hour's difficult travel, during which Rebecca's condition deteriorated rapidly. By the time they reached a small box canyon with a spring-fed pool, she was barely conscious, leaning heavily against Koa-Tay's solid frame. He settled her in the shade of a rock overhang, then immediately set about gathering particular plants from the canyon floor and surrounding slopes. Through a fever haze, Rebecca watched him work with swift efficiency, harvesting leaves, roots, and berries, grinding some between stones, setting others to steep in water. "What are those?" she managed to ask as he returned with a poultice of crushed green leaves. "Medic Ina," he replied, kneeling beside her. "This for the outside." He gestured to the poultice. "Others for inside." He indicated a small bark cup filled with steaming liquid. When he reached for her infected arm, Rebecca instinctively pulled back. "You know what you're doing?" A flicker of impatience crossed his features. "I have healed many wounds. My mother was medicine woman. Now drink." The concoction tasted intensely bitter. Rebecca grimaced but forced herself to swallow it all, then submitted to having the poultice applied to her wound. The immediate cooling sensation provided blessed relief. "Rest now," Koa-Tay instructed, settling back on his heels. "Medicine works while you sleep." Rebecca wanted to ask more questions, to maintain control over her situation, but exhaustion claimed her. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, she was vaguely aware of Koa-Tay speaking softly in his native tongue, perhaps a prayer or healing chant, though she couldn't be certain. Fever dreams chased her through landscapes both familiar and alien. Boston drawing rooms populated by Apache warriors, classroom blackboards covered in incomprehensible symbols. Her mother and Koa-Tay engaged in heated conversation while she tried desperately to translate between them. Throughout it all, a persistent throb in her arm kept dragging her back toward consciousness. When she finally surfaced fully, night had fallen. A small fire flickered nearby, illuminating Koa-Tay's profile as he maintained his vigil. Fresh poultice covered her wound, and a damp cloth lay across her forehead. "You stayed," she murmured, her voice raspy from thirst. Koa-Tay turned, surprise briefly visible in his eyes. "You expected I would leave you to die?" "I wouldn't have blamed you," Rebecca admitted. "I'm slowing your pursuit of the raiders." He offered her water, supporting her head as she drank. "The raid is finished. The raiders will have gone to ground like snakes after striking. Finding their den requires patience." "How long was I unwell?" "Sun has risen and fallen once since we arrived," he replied. "Your fever broke during night. The poison retreats from your blood." Rebecca absorbed this information with shock. "A full day? You've been tending me all this time." Koa-Tay shrugged as if the answer were self-evident. "You would have died otherwise." The simple statement hung between them, neither accusation nor boast, merely fact. In that moment, Rebecca saw beyond cultural differences to the fundamental humanity they shared. This man had saved her life not once but twice now, with a matter-of-factness that humbled her. "Ehehe," she said softly, using his language rather than her own. For the first time, Koa-Tay's stern features relaxed into something approaching a smile, brief but genuine. "You are welcome, Rebecca Thornton." It was the first time he had used her name. By morning, Rebecca's strength had returned sufficiently for her to sit outside their shelter, savoring the canyon's peaceful beauty. Sunlight streamed between red rock walls, illuminating desert blooms that had somehow found purchase in the harsh landscape. The small spring-fed pool reflected the cloudless sky, its surface occasionally dimpled by darting insects. Koa-Tay returned from scouting with a handful of quail eggs and wild onions. "You look better," he observed, setting down his findings. I feel almost human again, Rebecca agreed. She watched as he expertly kindled a small cooking fire. You've been very kind to a stranger. He worked in silence for a moment before responding. My people judge others by their actions, not where they were born. You have shown courage, determination. As have you, she replied. I've learned that courage comes in many forms. While the simple meal cooked, Koa-Tay knelt near the spring and began drawing in the damp earth with a stick. Rebecca approached curiously to find him sketching a crude but effective map. We are here, he explained. Indicating a small canyon mark, he traced a route northeast. Trading post is here, 2 days' walk. His finger moved west. Your Fort Whipple, for days from the post. Then he drew an X slightly south of their position. Stagecoach attack happened here. Rebecca studied the map with interest. And where were the raiders headed? Koa-Tay hesitated, then marked a location in the southeast. Signs suggest they have camp here, in Shadow Canyon. Bad place. Many hiding spots, few approaches. How many men? 6, maybe 7. His dark eyes met hers. Why do you ask these things? Rebecca knelt beside the map. Because I owe it to the others, the porters, the gambler. If they were taken rather than killed, they might still be alive. Koa-Tay's expression hardened. If taken, the man is likely dead already. The woman. He left the implication unspoken. Rebecca swallowed hard. All the more reason to help if we can. We. Koa-Tay's eyebrow rose. You are a schoolteacher with no weapons, no fighting skills. I have eyes and a mind, Rebecca countered. And you yourself said I notice things. Koa-Tay studied her for a long moment. The sensible path is still the trading post. Mackenzie has guns, men who can help. And how long would it take to convince them, organize a party, and return? Days at least. Rebecca's finger traced the route to Shadow Canyon. By then, it might be too late. It is likely already too late, Koa-Tay said bluntly. But you don't know that for certain. Rebecca met his gaze steadily. If it were your people taken, would you abandon them to fate? The question hung between them. Finally, Koa-Tay erased the map with a sweep of his hand. First we eat, then we talk more of this foolishness. Over breakfast, Rebecca pressed her case. Before we reach the trading post, could we at least verify if they're at this Shadow Canyon? Perhaps observe from a safe distance. Koa-Tay's jaw worked as he considered. It would add 1 day to our journey. 1 day that could save lives, Rebecca pointed out. Or end them, he countered. Including yours. Rebecca set down her food. I came west to make a difference in children's lives. What example would I set if I abandoned others in need because helping was dangerous? Something shifted in Koa-Tay's expression. Not quite approval, but a grudging respect. You are stubborn as mountain stone. I prefer determined, Rebecca replied with the ghost of a smile. First, we must gather your strength. 1 more day here to ensure the fever does not return. Rebecca began to protest, but Koa-Tay raised a hand. This is not negotiable. Only a fool rushes into danger already weakened. Recognizing the wisdom in his words, Rebecca nodded agreement. Then teach me something useful while we wait. Something that might help if we encounter the raiders. Koa-Tay considered this request, then stood. Come. I will show you how to move quietly. For the remainder of the day, he instructed her in the basics of stealth. How to place her feet to minimize sound. How to use terrain for concealment. How to control her breathing when nervous. Rebecca proved an apt pupil, her teacher's mindset helping her absorb his lessons methodically. As evening approached, they sat together by the spring, reviewing what she had learned. On impulse, Rebecca took a stick and began drawing in the dirt as Koa-Tay had done earlier. What is this? He asked, watching her create straight lines and angles. A schoolhouse, she explained, sketching a simple building with windows and a bell tower, like the one I was meant to teach in. She added stick figures of children. Though I had hoped for more students than this. You still believe you will reach this school? Rebecca glanced up, surprised by the genuine curiosity in his tone. Yes, Setbacks don't change destinations, only routes. Koa-Tay nodded slowly. A good teaching. Rebecca smiled and pointed to her crude drawing. And someday I hope to have Apache children among my students. All children deserve education. Even if their parents fought against your people? Especially then, Rebecca said firmly. Education builds bridges. The next generation shouldn't inherit our conflicts. As darkness fell, Koa-Tay stared thoughtfully at her drawing before erasing it with his foot. But Rebecca noticed he was gentler with the erasure than he had been with his own map, almost respectful of what the simple lines represented. Shadow Canyon deserved its name. Even at midday, its narrow walls admitted only scattered shafts of sunlight, creating a perpetual twilight within its winding confines. From their vantage point on a high ridge, Rebecca and Koa-Tay surveyed the raider camp nestled deep within the canyon's protective embrace. 7 men, Koa-Tay confirmed in a whisper. For hostages. Rebecca squinted, trying to make out details through the dancing patterns of light and shadow. The porters. The missionary and his wife, yes. Another woman. And a child. Rebecca's heart clenched. A child? I saw no child on the stagecoach. From elsewhere, Koa-Tay surmised. Perhaps taken in another raid. Using hand signals he had taught her during their journey, Rebecca indicated she wanted to move closer. Koa-Tay frowned but led her to a sheltered overhang with a clearer view of the camp. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The captives were bound, the women's clothing torn and dirty. Mrs. Porter's face bore a vivid bruise. The child, a girl no more than 10, huddled against the missionary's wife, eyes wide with terror. We must help them, Rebecca whispered. How? Koa-Tay challenged softly. 7 armed men against 1 warrior and a teacher? There must be a way, she insisted. Perhaps if we... She fell silent as movement in the camp caught her attention. A man emerged from the largest tent, tall, straight-backed, with a military bearing that seemed oddly familiar. When he turned, Rebecca gasped. Colonel Hargrove. Koa-Tay's hand instantly covered her mouth, his eyes fierce with warning. When he felt her nod her understanding, he slowly removed his hand. The cavalry officer from your stagecoach? He questioned. You said he was killed. I saw him shot, Rebecca whispered, bewilderment and horror mingling in her voice. There was blood. He wasn't breathing. Yet he stands, Koa-Tay observed grimly. Rebecca's mind raced. He must have staged his own death during the attack. But why? As if in answer, Hargrove barked orders to his men, who began unloading crates from a covered wagon. One splintered open as they handled it roughly, spilling its contents onto the ground, rifles, gleaming new in the dappled light. Guns, Koa-Tay growled. Army guns. Another man approached Hargrove, handing him what appeared to be papers. The colonel examined them, then pointed to locations on what Rebecca realized must be a map. This is no ordinary bandit operation, she murmured. It's too organized, too purposeful. Koa-Tay's expression had turned to stone. Your cavalry steals from its own people to arm raiders against mine, then blames Apache for the attacks. Not my cavalry, Rebecca corrected sharply. Corrupt men abusing their position. Movement below interrupted their exchange. A rider approached the camp, a scout returning from patrol. He dismounted and conferred briefly with Hargrove, who turned to survey the canyon walls with sudden intensity. We've been discovered, Koa-Tay said, pulling Rebecca deeper into the shadows. We must leave. Now. They retreated swiftly up a narrow game trail, Koa-Tay leading, Rebecca following his exact footsteps as he had taught her. They had nearly reached the ridge when Rebecca's boot dislodged a stone. It clattered down the slope, the sound amplified in the canyon's acoustic chamber. Shouts erupted below. A rifle shot cracked against the rocks near their position. Run! Koa-Tay commanded, abandoning stealth for speed. They fled along the ridgeline, bullets occasionally whining past as the raiders gave chase. Rebecca's lungs burned, but fear propelled her forward. When Koa-Tay suddenly pulled her into a crevice barely wide enough for them to squeeze through, She followed without question. The narrow passage twisted downward, eventually opening into a small grotto invisible from above. A natural spring bubbled from the rock wall, its gentle sound masking their labored breathing. "Will they find us?" Rebecca gasped when she could speak again. "Not likely," Koa-Tay replied, though he kept his voice low. "Few know of this place." As her racing heart gradually slowed, Rebecca processed what they had witnessed. Those weren't just any guns they were unloading. They looked like new army repeating rifles, the kind only being issued to frontier regiments. Koa-Tay nodded grimly. "Enough to arm many raiders. Or my people if they choose to sell them instead. Either way, it creates more violence," Rebecca concluded. "More attacks blamed on Apache. Which gives the army excuse to move against all tribes," Koa-Tay finished. "Even those who seek peace." Rebecca slumped against the cool stone wall. "And Colonel Hargrove is part of it. That's why he was on the stagecoach to coordinate with these men." As she spoke, her hand brushed something metallic half buried in the sandy floor. Curious, she dug it out. A cavalry uniform button, its brass surface tarnished but the eagle insignia still visible. "Look," she said, holding it up. "They've used this place before." Koa-Tay examined the button, his expression darkening. "This changes everything. Your destination must wait." "What do you mean?" "This conspiracy threatens both our peoples," he explained. "We must warn my tribe, then find a way to expose these men." Rebecca turned the button in her fingers, the weight of its implications heavy in her palm. "You're right. The school will have to wait." She met his gaze with newfound resolve. "So where do we go from here?" "My people must be warned first," Koa-Tay declared as they traveled through the night, putting distance between themselves and Shadow Canyon. "If Hargrove's men attack with those new rifles, many will die." Rebecca kept pace despite her exhaustion. "Will your tribe believe you?" "Believe us. The button is evidence," Koa-Tay replied. "And you are witness." "Me?" Rebecca faltered mid-step. "You're taking me to your camp?" Koa-Tay stopped, turning to face her in the silver moonlight. "You have seen the truth with your own eyes. My words alone may not be enough." "But I'm white," Rebecca pointed out. "Won't your people assume I'm part of the conspiracy?" "Some will," he acknowledged. "But Chief Nilchi is wise. He listens before judging." Rebecca swallowed hard. No white woman she knew of had ever entered an Apache camp voluntarily and emerged to tell the tale. Yet the alternative, allowing Hargrove's plan to unfold unchallenged, was unthinkable. "Lead on," she said simply. They reached the Apache camp shortly after dawn. Rebecca's first impression was of ordered efficiency. Lodges arranged in a protective circle, cooking fires already active, children helping with morning chores. Far from the chaotic savagery portrayed in Eastern newspapers, the scene reminded her of any frontier settlement going about its daily business. Their arrival caused an immediate stir. Women gathered children protectively. Warriors appeared with weapons ready. Koa-Tay raised his hand in a gesture of peace, speaking rapidly in Apache. An older man with silver-streaked hair stepped forward, authority evident in his bearing. Chief Nilchi, Rebecca presumed. Behind him stood another warrior who shared Koa-Tay's features. A brother, perhaps. Koa-Tay addressed the chief with formal respect, occasionally indicating Rebecca, or producing the cavalry button as he spoke. Though she couldn't understand the words, the growing tension in the air was unmistakable. When he finished, the chief turned to study Rebecca with penetrating eyes. "You are the teacher," he said in accented but clear English. "Why should we believe you are not part of this plot against us?" Rebecca straightened her spine. "I have no reason to lie, Chief Nilchi. My stagecoach was attacked. I nearly died in your territory. Koa-Tay saved my life twice. I owe him truth, as I owe it to you now." The chief's expression remained impassive. "Come. The council will hear you both." Inside the council lodge, Rebecca found herself seated before a semicircle of tribal elders. A ceremonial pipe was passed, a ritual she recognized from her readings on native customs. When it reached her, She accepted it with appropriate solemnity, taking a small draw before passing it on. Koa-Tay recounted their discoveries for the council, with Rebecca adding details when asked. She described Colonel Hargrove's behavior on the stagecoach, his apparent death, and his reappearance as the raiders' leader. He spoke against Apache even before the attack, she explained. Now I understand why. He was laying groundwork to blame you for his own actions. One elder, older than the rest with deeply lined features, leaned forward. Many moons ago, 2 whites came to our camp, a man and woman of God. They spoke of peace between our peoples. They warned that some whites sought our land by creating false attacks. Rebecca's pulse quickened. The porters? The missionary couple. The elder nodded. They showed respect for our ways. Said they would bring evidence of this plot to authorities. Then they disappeared. Now we know they were taken by these same raiders. They're still alive, Rebecca confirmed. Held captive with a woman and child. We must help them. A murmur of disagreement rippled through the council. One warrior spoke heatedly in Apache, gesturing toward Rebecca with obvious suspicion. Tashin believes this is a trap, Koa-Tay translated quietly. That you lead us into ambush. Rebecca felt a flash of indignation, quickly replaced by understanding. From their perspective, trusting any white person represented enormous risk. I understand your caution, she addressed the elders directly. You have suffered betrayals before. But consider this. If I meant you harm, why would I come here at all? I could have continued to the trading post, said nothing of what I saw. The chief exchanged glances with his council. What would you have us do, teacher? First, protect your people by moving your camp. Then help me free the hostages and expose Hargrove's conspiracy. With proof, we could take this to honest authorities. Show that Apache are not responsible for these attacks. Intense discussion erupted among the elders, too rapid for Rebecca to follow. She waited, aware that her life might hang on their decision. Finally, Chief Nilchi raised his hand for silence. We will move the camp, he announced. As for the rest, the council is divided. Some believe we should attack these raiders ourselves. Others say we should avoid this white man's trouble. He fixed Rebecca with a penetrating gaze. You ask much from people who have received little but suffering from yours. I ask for justice, Rebecca replied. For all our sakes. The chief studied her for a long moment, then turned to Koa-Tay. Shadow Walker, you brought this woman to us. What does your heart tell you of her words? Koa-Tay's response, spoken in Apache, needed no translation. His tone, his posture, the brief glance he cast toward Rebecca, all conveyed his conviction of her integrity. Chief Nilchi nodded slowly. Then we will listen further to this plan. But know this, teacher, we place our trust in you because Shadow Walker gives his word for yours. Do not make him regret this faith. Dawn had barely broken when Rebecca found herself sitting cross-legged in Koa-Tay's lodge, surrounded by the tribe's most experienced warriors. Using a small slate she had salvaged from her satchel and a piece of chalk, she sketched the layout of Shadow Canyon and the raiders' camp from memory. The captives are kept here, she indicated, marking an X near the central fire pit, always guarded by at least 2 men. The weapons are stored in this tent, which is never left unattended. Nanto, whom she now knew was indeed Koa-Tay's younger brother, studied the drawing with a hunter's keen eye. Many places for ambush along these walls, he observed. But also many places for them to hide, countered another warrior. And they know the canyon better than we do. Not better than Shadow Walker, Nanto said with quiet pride. My brother memorized every stone and path while tracking them. Koa-Tay nodded acknowledgement but remained focused on the practical challenge. They have 7 men with rifles. We have 5 warriors with bows and only 2 rifles. Surprise will even those odds, Rebecca suggested. If we can free the hostages before the main attack begins. We, Koa-Tay interrupted, his expression stern. There is no we in this fight. You will remain here with the women and children. Rebecca's chalk stilled on the slate. I'm coming with you. You are not a warrior. No, but I know Colonel Hargrove. I understand how he thinks, how he'll react. She met Koa-Tay's gaze without flinching. And the porters know me. They'll trust me immediately, which saves precious time explaining during the rescue. The warriors exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with her participation. Rebecca pressed her advantage. Besides, no one will expect a white woman to be part of an Apache raid. I can create a distraction if needed. Koa-Tay's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Chief Nilchi entered the lodge. The warriors made space for him in the circle. The teacher makes a strong case, the chief said, having evidently overheard the discussion. Sometimes the unexpected weapon is the most effective. She has no training, Koa-Tay objected. She would be a liability in battle. Then train her, the chief replied simply. We have 2 days before we move against these raiders. Teach her what she needs to know to survive. Though clearly unhappy with the decision, Koa-Tay nodded his acceptance. As you wish, Chief. The planning session continued for another hour, with Rebecca contributing insights about Hargrove's military background that helped shape their strategy. When the meeting concluded, she found herself both exhilarated and terrified by what lay ahead. Koa-Tay wasted no time beginning her training. In a small clearing away from the main camp, he demonstrated basic defensive moves. If a man grabs you here, he said, taking her arm in a firm grip, turn toward his thumb. It is the weakest point. He guided her through the motion until she could break free consistently. And if he comes from behind? Rebecca asked. Like this. In one fluid motion, Koa-Tay stepped behind her and wrapped an arm around her throat, not applying pressure, but demonstrating the hold. Yes, she managed, suddenly very aware of his proximity, the solid strength of him at her back. Strike here. He guided her elbow to a point below his ribs. Or here. He moved her hand to a position that would impact his groin if she followed through. Then run. Do not stay to fight. For hours they practiced these defensive techniques, how to break holds, create distance, use a small knife effectively. Rebecca absorbed everything with the same focused determination that had earned her top marks at the Women's College in Boston. By late afternoon, Koa-Tay had moved on to teaching her how to move silently through brush, how to communicate with hand signals, and basic tracking awareness. Though he remained professional throughout, Rebecca sensed a growing respect in his manner. As dusk approached, he unexpectedly produced a rifle. You must learn to shoot, he stated flatly. Rebecca eyed the weapon with trepidation. I've never fired a gun. Then it is time you learned. He placed it in her hands, adjusting her grip with firm, patient fingers. This may save your life or others. The rifle felt impossibly heavy and awkward in her grasp. Koa-Tay positioned himself behind her, his arms coming around to demonstrate proper stance and aim. Despite the seriousness of the moment, Rebecca found herself distracted by his nearness, the low rumble of his voice near her ear as he explained the weapon's mechanics. Breathe in, he instructed, then halfway out. Hold. Squeeze gently. The rifle's report cracked through the evening air, the recoil jolting through Rebecca's shoulder despite Koa-Tay's supporting presence. Somewhere in the distance, bark splintered from a tree, nowhere near the target he had indicated. Again, he said simply. By the 5th shot, she managed to hit the broadside of the designated tree. By the 10th, she could strike near the center mark Koa-Tay had carved into the trunk. You learn quickly, he acknowledged as they walked back to camp, the light nearly gone. I've always been a dedicated student, Rebecca replied. Then, more softly, thank you for teaching me. Koa-Tay glanced at her, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. Knowledge keeps you alive. That is what matters. But as they parted ways at the edge of camp, Rebecca sensed there was something more he wasn't saying, something beyond the practical concerns of their dangerous mission. In the brief touch of his hand on her shoulder, in the lingering look before he turned away, she felt the first whisper of a connection that transcended their different worlds. The night before the raid, the Apache camp was quiet with purpose. Women prepared medicine bundles for the warriors. Children were unusually subdued, sensing the gravity in the air. Rebecca sat outside Koa-Tay's sister-in-law's lodge, where she had been given shelter, watching as 5 warriors painted their faces with red and black stripes. Traditional protection symbols, Nanto had explained. Koa-Tay approached, carrying something wrapped in soft leather. He knelt beside Rebecca, his face already bearing the stark war paint that transformed his features into something both magnificent and terrible. "For you," he said, unwrapping the bundle to reveal a rifle. Not new like those in the raider's cache, but well-maintained, its wooden stock smooth from years of handling. Rebecca accepted it with appropriate solemnity. "Whose was it?" "My father's," Koa-Tay replied. "He would approve of its use tomorrow." The significance of this gesture wasn't lost on Rebecca. To entrust her with a family weapon represented a level of acceptance she hadn't dared hope for. "I'm honored," she said simply. "I'll use it well. I will position you here." Koa-Tay indicated a spot on the small map they'd refined over the past 2 days. "High ground, protected, with clear view of the camp. You watch, nothing more, unless there is no choice." Rebecca nodded, tracing the rifle's barrel with her finger. The weapon represented her crossing between worlds. A Boston schoolteacher prepared to fight alongside Apache warriors against corrupt white men. The irony wasn't lost on her. "If something happens to me," she began hesitantly. "Nothing will happen," Koa-Tay cut her off. "You stay in position. You survive." "But if it does," Rebecca persisted, "please make sure my journal reaches my sister in Boston, Emily Thornton. The address is inside the cover." Koa-Tay's expression softened marginally. "I give my word, but such promises will not be needed." Chief Nilchi summoned the war party to the council lodge for final preparations. Inside, the air was thick with ceremonial smoke, the atmosphere solemn as each warrior received a blessing. To Rebecca's surprise, the chief beckoned her forward as well. "You fight with my people," he said, daubing a small mark of red ochre on her forehead. "May the Creator guide your steps and sharpen your eyes." "Thank you, Chief Nilchi," Rebecca responded, deeply moved by this inclusion. Outside the lodge, the eastern sky had begun to pale. Soon they would depart, traveling through the early morning hours to reach Shadow Canyon by midday, when most of the raiders would be at their least alert. As the warriors made their final preparations, Rebecca found a moment alone with Koa-Tay near the edge of camp. "There's something I need to ask," she said. "After this is over, if we succeed, what happens then?" Koa-Tay secured a knife at his belt before answering. "If we have proof of this conspiracy, I will take it to Agent Thompson at the reservation. He is one of the few white men who deals fairly with my people. And me? Will you still guide me to the trading post? To Fort Whipple?" Something flickered in his eyes. A hesitation, perhaps even regret. "If that is still your wish." The simple response contained layers Rebecca wasn't prepared to examine, not with danger looming so close. Instead, she nodded and adjusted the rifle strap across her shoulder. "It's time," Nanto called softly from nearby. The small party departed as first light broke over the eastern mesas. 5 Apache warriors, moving with the silent efficiency of born hunters. And Rebecca, keeping pace despite her city upbringing, the rifle a constant reminder of what lay ahead. They traveled swiftly through landscapes that had become almost familiar to Rebecca over the past days. Red rock formations, juniper-studded arroyos, narrow game trails winding between imposing cliffs. By mid-morning, they had reached the outer approaches to Shadow Canyon. Koa-Tay signaled for a halt, gathering the group in a sheltered hollow for final instructions. Using a stick, he traced positions in the dirt. "Nanto and Taza will approach from the south rim," he explained. "Besh and Goyathlay from the north. I will lead the center approach with Rebecca positioned here, overlooking the main camp." "What about lookouts?" Rebecca asked. "Hargrove was military. He'll have posted sentries." Koa-Tay nodded. "Already accounted for. We observed 3 regular positions during our scouting yesterday." "The woman thinks like a warrior," Besh commented with grudging approval. The final approach required them to separate, each taking their assigned routes. Before they parted, Koa-Tay drew Rebecca aside. "Remember what I taught you," he said, his voice low and intense. "Watch from cover. Signal if you see movement where there should be none. Use the rifle only if there is no choice." Rebecca nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. The reality of what they were about to attempt pressed down on her like a physical weight. Impulsively, she reached out, placing her hand on Koa-Tay's arm. "Be careful," she whispered. He covered her hand with his own, the brief contact communicating more than words could express. Then he was gone, moving like his namesake, a shadow across the rugged terrain. Rebecca made her way carefully to her assigned position, a natural shelf of rock that offered both concealment and a clear view of the raiders' camp below. She settled the rifle across a flat stone, just as Koa-Tay had taught her, and waited. The canyon lay quiet in the midday heat. From her vantage point, Rebecca could see two raiders lounging in the shade of a canvas awning, another cleaning a gun outside the main tent. Of Colonel Hargrove there was no sign, likely resting in the largest tent during the hottest hours. The captives sat huddled together near the central fire pit, Mrs. Porter's arm protectively around the child. They looked exhausted but alive, a small mercy in this grim situation. As Rebecca scanned the camp for the remaining raiders, a flicker of movement caught her eye, not in the camp, but along the opposite ridge. Another lookout, one they hadn't accounted for. And he was staring directly at her position. Rebecca froze, barely breathing as the lookout's gaze swept across her position. Had he seen her or merely sensed movement? She pressed herself lower against the warm stone, Koa-Tay's lessons echoing in her mind. Stillness is your shield. Patience your weapon. The lookout raised a spyglass to his eye, scanning methodically. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs as the brass instrument glinted in the sunlight, pointing directly at her hiding place. Then moving on. He hadn't spotted her. Relief flooded her veins, but the danger remained. This unexpected sentry could ruin their entire plan if not dealt with. She needed to alert Koa-Tay, but he was already moving into position below, invisible among the canyon's complex shadows. Rebecca weighed her options. The signal whistle they'd arranged might alert not only Koa-Tay but also the raiders. Using the rifle would certainly give away her position. That left only one choice: she would have to move. Carefully, she backed away from her vantage point, staying low until terrain concealed her from the lookout's sight. Then, remembering Koa-Tay's instruction for silent movement, she began working her way toward the position where Nanto and Taza should be approaching. She had covered perhaps 50 yards when a shout from the camp below shattered the midday quiet. The raiders had spotted one of the Apache warriors. Gunfire erupted, the sharp crack of rifles echoing off canyon walls. The carefully orchestrated plan collapsed in an instant as both sides were forced into premature action. Rebecca scrambled back to higher ground, desperate for a view of the unfolding chaos. Below, the camp had erupted into frenzied activity. 3 raiders had taken defensive positions behind supply crates, firing toward the northern rim where Besh and Goyathley were pinned down. 2 others were rushing toward the captives, perhaps intending to use them as shields or leverage. Mrs. Porter, showing unexpected courage, was trying to hustle the child behind the meager protection of a water barrel. Her husband struggled with his bonds, attempting to free himself. Of Koa-Tay, Rebecca saw no sign until a blur of movement revealed him engaging a raider in hand-to-hand combat near the weapons tent. His knife flashed once, twice, the raider fell. Rebecca raised the rifle, forcing herself to remember Koa-Tay's instructions. Breathe in, halfway out, hold, squeeze gently. The rifle bucked against her shoulder as she fired at one of the men approaching the captives. She missed, but the shot sent him diving for cover, buying precious seconds for the porters. Colonel Hargrove emerged from the main tent, revolver in hand, barking orders to rally his men. Rebecca's second shot kicked up dust at his feet, forcing him to retreat behind a wagon wheel. Arrows rained from the canyon rim as Nanto and Taza provided covering fire. One found its mark in a raider's shoulder, spinning him to the ground with a howl of pain. Rebecca worked the rifle's lever action with hands that felt oddly steady despite the chaos. Her third shot struck a stack of ammunition crates, sending one raider scrambling away from the resulting spray of splinters. Below, Koa-Tay had reached the captives and was cutting their bonds. The porters' faces transformed with hope as they recognized freedom was at hand. The second woman, whom Rebecca now saw was barely more than a girl herself, clutched the child protectively as they prepared to run. A new sound cut through the gunfire, hoofbeats approaching fast from the canyon's entrance. Reinforcements for the raiders, Rebecca realized with dread. Their small rescue party would soon be overwhelmed. In the camp, Koa-Tay clearly heard the approaching riders too. He made a split-second decision, directing the freed captives toward a narrow crevice in the canyon wall while he provided cover. Colonel Hargrove, seeing his prisoners escaping, broke from his protection with murderous intent. He raised his revolver, aiming directly at Koa-Tay's unprotected back. "No!" Rebecca's shout was lost in the din of battle. She sighted down the rifle barrel, time seeming to slow as she aligned the sights on Hargrove's chest. This was no tree trunk target. This was a man, corrupt and dangerous but still a human life. Could she truly take it? Mrs. Porter's bruised face flashed in her mind. The child's terrified eyes. The conspiracy that threatened both settlers and Apache alike. Rebecca squeezed the trigger. The bullet caught Hargrove in the shoulder, spinning him around but not killing him. His shot went wild as he fell, cursing. Koa-Tay turned at the sound, his eyes finding Rebecca on the ridge. A moment of understanding passed between them before he resumed guiding the captives to safety. The approaching riders thundered into the canyon, 4 men heavily armed. Among them, Rebecca recognized the quiet gambler from the stagecoach now revealed as part of Hargrove's operation. With the captives temporarily secure in the crevice, Koa-Tay retrieved a rifle from a fallen raider and joined the fight in earnest. His shots were precise, disciplined, dropping one of the newcomers from his horse with lethal accuracy. Besh and Goyathley had worked their way to better positions and now added their firepower to the defense. Another raider fell, clutching his leg. In the midst of the firefight, a stray bullet struck one of the lanterns hanging outside Hargrove's tent. Oil spilled across canvas, igniting instantly. Flames leapt hungrily from tent to tent, thick smoke beginning to fill the canyon. Rebecca realized with horror that the fire was spreading toward the weapons cache, and the substantial ammunition stored there. If it reached those supplies, she had to warn them. Taking a deep breath, Rebecca abandoned her sheltered position and began scrambling down toward the inferno below, the silver watch she'd taken from a fallen raider. Proof of the conspiracy. Secured in her pocket, smoke churned through Shadow Canyon, turning midday to murky twilight. Rebecca half ran, half slid down the rocky slope, losing her footing several times on loose shale. The rifle bounced awkwardly against her back, its strap tangled with her torn dress. "Fire!" she shouted as she neared the camp's edge. "The ammunition will explode." Gunfire continued to echo off the canyon walls, but the nature of the battle had changed. With flames spreading rapidly through the camp, both sides were now fighting the additional enemy of fire. Through the thickening smoke, Rebecca spotted Koa-Tay leading the captives toward the canyon's southern exit. She altered course to intercept them, narrowly avoiding a burning tent pole as it crashed to the ground. "Rebecca!" Mrs. Porter cried upon seeing her, disbelief and joy mingling in her soot-streaked face. "This way," Rebecca urged, pointing toward a path less affected by smoke. "The ammunition stores will blow any minute." Koa-Tay nodded grimly, shepherding the group forward. The young girl stumbled, exhaustion evident in her trembling limbs. Without hesitation, Koa-Tay lifted her onto his back and pressed on. They had nearly reached the relative safety of a rock outcropping when a bullet struck stone inches from Rebecca's head. She turned to see Colonel Hargrove staggering after them, blood soaking his left side but determination burning in his eyes. "You'll hang for this, schoolmarm," he snarled, raising his revolver for another shot. Before he could fire, Reverend Porter tackled him with surprising strength for a man of God. The 2 men went down in a tangle of limbs, wrestling for control of the weapon. "Go!" the missionary shouted. "Get them to safety." Koa-Tay grabbed Rebecca's arm, pulling her toward the exit path. "We cannot help him now. We can't just leave him." Rebecca protested. The child. The women. They need us more. Koa-Tay countered, his logic unassailable even as her heart rebelled. A thunderous explosion rocked the canyon as the first ammunition crates caught fire. Debris rained down, a piece of shrapnel slicing across Koa-Tay's upper arm. He grunted in pain but didn't slow his pace. "You're hurt," Rebecca said, tearing a strip from her petticoat as they hurried along. "Later," he replied tersely. They had just cleared the canyon's southern mouth when Reverend Porter came stumbling after them, his face bloodied but triumphant. "Hargrove?" Koa-Tay asked. "Pinned under a burning wagon," Porter replied grimly. "He won't trouble anyone again." The group pressed on as a series of secondary explosions echoed behind them, the canyon becoming a death trap of fire and flying metal. They didn't stop until they'd reached a small stream nearly half a mile away, where they finally collapsed in exhaustion. "Where are the others?" Rebecca asked, suddenly realizing they were alone. "Nanto? The other warriors. They will find their own way out," Koa-Tay assured her, though concern shadowed his features. "They know these lands well." While Mrs. Porter and the other woman tended to the traumatized child, Rebecca finally had a chance to examine Koa-Tay's wound. The shrapnel had carved a deep furrow across his bicep, blood flowing freely down his arm. "Hold still," she instructed, using water from the stream to clean the injury before binding it with the makeshift bandage. Her hands moved with surprising steadiness despite the day's chaos. "You have done this before?" Koa-Tay asked, watching her efficient movements. "I volunteered in a hospital during the smallpox outbreak in Boston," she explained. Basic wound care was necessary knowledge. As she secured the bandage, their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement of what they had just survived together, of boundaries crossed that could never be reestablished. "Thank you," he said simply, "for the warning about the fire. Many would have died without it." Rebecca tied off the bandage. "And thank you for saving me, not just today but from the beginning." The moment was interrupted by shouts from upstream, Nanto and Taza appearing through the brush, followed shortly by Besh. Only Koa-Tay was missing, having taken an injury that slowed but wouldn't endanger him. The reunited group shared water and took stock of their situation. The captives were free but exhausted. The warriors were variously wounded but triumphant. And the raiders' operation lay in smoldering ruins behind them. "We found these," Nanto said, producing several documents from inside his buckskin shirt. "Maps, orders with army seals." Rebecca examined them eagerly. Combined with Hargrove's watch and their eyewitness accounts, they now had concrete evidence of the conspiracy. "What happens now?" Mrs. Porter asked, voicing the question in everyone's mind. "We return to my people first," Koa-Tay decided. "Then, when you have rested, we take this evidence to those who can use it." As they prepared to move on, Rebecca found herself standing beside Koa-Tay at the stream's edge. Without speaking, they both dipped their hands into the cool water, washing away blood and soot. When Koa-Tay's handkerchief floated downstream, stained crimson from his wound, Rebecca caught it reflexively. "You should keep this," she said softly, wringing out the bloodied cloth. "A reminder of what we accomplished today." Koa-Tay took the handkerchief from her, his fingers brushing hers. "Some things," he replied, tucking it carefully inside his shirt, "need no reminder." The simple exchange, amid the aftermath of violence and fire, carried a weight that neither was prepared to fully acknowledge. Instead, they turned together to rejoin the others, a new understanding binding them as surely as the blood-stained cloth bound Koa-Tay's wound. The return to the Apache camp took on the quality of a triumphant procession, despite the group's exhaustion and injuries. Children ran to meet them, wide-eyed at the sight of white captives walking freely among their warriors. Chief Nilchi stood at the camp's edge, his weathered face revealing relief as he counted each returning fighter. "You have succeeded," he stated, his gaze taking in the freed hostages and the documents Nanto carried. "At a price," Koa-Tay replied solemnly. "Koa-Tay follows behind, wounded but alive. The raiders are destroyed." The chief's eyes settled on Rebecca, noting her torn dress, soot-streaked face, and the rifle still slung across her back. The teacher fought with courage? Like one born to our ways, Nanto answered before his brother could speak. She warned us of danger and fought beside us without fear. Rebecca felt a flush of pride at this unexpected praise, though she knew her actions had been driven more by necessity than bravery. I only did what was needed, she said simply. That evening, the camp held a modest celebration of their victory. The rescued captives were given places of honor near the council fire, with the young girl, who they learned was named Sarah, daughter of settlers killed in an earlier raid, quickly becoming the particular pet of several Apache children. The porters explained how they had been targeted after gathering evidence of collaboration between corrupt army officers and raiders. We were bringing the documents to Fort Whipple when our stagecoach was attacked, Reverend Porter explained. Hargrove recognized us from previous encounters. Your visit to our camp last season is remembered, Chief Nilchi told them. You spoke truly then about those who would create conflict between our peoples. Rebecca, seated beside Koa-Tay, marveled at how quickly fear and suspicion had given way to cautious respect on both sides. The scene before her, Apache and whites sharing food and conversation around a common fire, embodied everything she had hoped to achieve through education. Your school will need to teach this, she murmured to Koa-Tay, gesturing toward the gathering. That peace is possible when we recognize our common humanity. If there is to be a school, he replied. Fort Whipple is still far, and the trail dangerous. Rebecca studied his profile in the firelight. You still intend to take me there? Before he could answer, Reverend Porter approached them, holding a folded document. Miss Thornton, I wonder if I might speak with you privately? Curious, Rebecca followed him to a quieter spot at the camp's edge. There, he handed her the paper, official letterhead visible in the fading light. This is a treaty proposal, he explained. Something my wife and I have been working on with sympathetic officials. It would establish a neutral teaching ground on the border of Apache territory, where children of both cultures could receive education. Rebecca's heart quickened as she scanned the document. This is exactly what's needed. We had an instructor in mind, Porter continued. But circumstances have changed. Having seen your courage and commitment these past days, I believe you would be the ideal teacher for such an endeavor. Me? Rebecca's voice caught with emotion. But my assignment was made without full understanding of the situation here, Porter finished gently. The territorial superintendent has granted me some discretion in these matters. If you're willing, the position is yours. Rebecca's mind raced with possibilities. A school at the cultural crossroads, serving both settler and Apache children. It was a more meaningful opportunity than she had dared imagine. The location would need Chief Nilchi's approval, she noted, practical concerns surfacing through her excitement. Indeed, we plan to present the proposal to the council tomorrow. Porter smiled. I suspect your friend Shadow Walker's opinion will carry significant weight in their deliberations. After Porter returned to the fire, Rebecca remained in the gathering darkness, contemplating this unexpected turn of events. She didn't hear Koa-Tay approach until he spoke. The missionary has offered you a new path, he observed. Not a question. He had either overheard or intuited the conversation's nature. A school at the border of Apache land, Rebecca confirmed, teaching children from both worlds. Koa-Tay was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the deepening twilight. And this would please you? More than the school at Fort Whipple. It would, Rebecca admitted. But it depends on your people's willingness to trust a white teacher. Trust is earned, Koa-Tay replied. You have begun this earning. The simple statement warmed her more than elaborate praise might have. She looked toward the fire, where Apache children were teaching Sarah a traditional game involving stones and intricate hand movements. Children adapt more easily than adults, she observed. They see possibilities where we see barriers. This is why teaching matters, Koa-Tay agreed. It shapes what they will see when they become warriors and leaders. Rebecca turned to face him fully. Would you support such a school before your council? The question carried weight beyond the immediate proposal. It asked about his vision for the future, about his willingness to help bridge the divide between their worlds. Koa-Tay met her gaze steadily. "I would speak for it," he said, "not only for the children's sake." The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to voice what had been growing since their first meeting in the desert. Instead, Rebecca simply nodded, hope blossoming in her heart like one of the resilient desert flowers that somehow thrived in this harsh, beautiful land. The tribal council convened at dawn, their semicircle arrangement now including the porters as honored guests. Rebecca sat slightly apart, aware that her presence was unprecedented but permitted due to her role in recent events. Chief Nilchi opened proceedings by passing the ceremonial pipe, its carved bowl depicting stories of the tribe's history. When it reached Reverend Porter, the missionary handled it with appropriate respect, taking a ceremonial draw before passing it on. The discussion that followed was conducted primarily in Apache, with Koa-Tay occasionally translating key points for Rebecca's benefit. The evidence of the conspiracy, maps, orders, Hargrove's watch, was examined thoroughly. Plans were made to present these materials to Agent Thompson at the reservation and to trustworthy authorities at Fort Whipple. "Now," the chief said, switching to English out of courtesy to their guests, "we consider the missionaries' proposal for a teaching place on our borders." Reverend Porter rose, presenting the treaty document with formal dignity. "This agreement would establish a neutral ground where knowledge can be shared between our peoples. The school would teach both English and Apache language, both white and Apache ways." Tashin, the eldest council member, spoke skeptically. "Why should we want our children to learn white ways? These have brought only suffering to our people." "To understand an enemy is strength," Koa-Tay responded. "To turn an enemy into a friend is greater strength." A spirited debate ensued, with opinions divided. Some warriors argued passionately against any arrangement that might weaken Apache traditions. Others saw strategic advantage in having their children understand the language and customs of the encroaching settlers. When the discussion reached an impasse, all eyes turned to Koa-Tay, whose status as their most respected tracker and warrior gave his opinion particular weight. He spoke deliberately, choosing his words with care. "5 days ago, I found a white woman lost in our territory, an enemy by birth, if not by deed. I could have left her to die. Instead, I helped her, and in return, she helped expose a plot against our people. She fought beside us, risked her life for our cause." He gestured toward Rebecca. "If one woman can cross the divide between our worlds, cannot our children do the same? Not to become white, but to become stronger Apache who understand the changing world around us." His words seemed to sway several undecided elders. Nanto added his support, describing Rebecca's courage during the battle at Shadow Canyon. Even Besh, initially skeptical of her involvement, acknowledged her contribution. Finally, Chief Nilchi raised his hand for silence. "We will allow this school," he announced, "with conditions. It must be built on the boundary, not on our sacred lands. Our elders must be permitted to teach our ways alongside the white learning. And," he fixed Rebecca with a penetrating gaze, "the teacher must demonstrate true commitment to understanding our people." "I accept these conditions," Rebecca responded without hesitation. "And I pledge to respect Apache wisdom and traditions in all my teaching." The chief nodded, then turned to the porters. "Take our evidence to your authorities. Tell them Apache wish peace, but not at the price of our dignity or our lands." As the council dispersed, Rebecca found herself standing before a sandstone outcropping where the sunrise illuminated natural shelves in the rock, perfect dimensions for a small schoolhouse. She placed her hand on the warm stone, imagining children gathered there, learning to read, to calculate, to understand each other's worlds. Koa-Tay joined her, carrying a flat stone approximately the size of a building brick. "First foundation," he explained, placing it at the outcropping's base. "In our tradition, the first stone must be set by those who envision the structure." Rebecca knelt beside him, adjusting the stone slightly to ensure it sat level. "In Boston, they would have a grand ceremony for this, with speeches and ribbons. Here, we have only purpose and hope," Koa-Tay replied. "Sometimes, These are stronger foundations. Over the following weeks, the simple schoolhouse took shape through combined effort. Apache men cut and placed sandstone blocks. Reverend Porter arranged for lumber to be delivered from the nearest settlement. Women from the tribe crafted woven mats for the floor while Rebecca ordered books and slates through Fort Whipple's supply channels. Throughout the construction, Rebecca lived in a small lodge at the edge of the Apache camp, learning their language and customs by day, writing detailed letters to her sister by lamplight. In one such letter, she confessed, "I came west seeking purpose and found it in a place I never expected." The school building itself is humble. One room with a stone floor and cedar pole roof, but what it represents is magnificent. Already 6 Apache children and 4 from settler families have been registered to attend. Their parents eye each other warily, but the children play together without reservation. Asterisk. Emily, you asked in your last letter about my safety among wild Indians. I must tell you that I have never felt safer than under the protection of these people, particularly one man whose courage and wisdom have changed my understanding of the world. Asterisk. She paused in her writing, pen hovering above the page, as she considered how much to reveal about her evolving feelings for Koa-Tay. Their connection had deepened during the weeks of working side by side, expressed more through shared glances and brief touches than through words. A knock at her lodge entrance interrupted her thoughts. She opened the flap to find Koa-Tay standing there, his expression unusually hesitant. "Tomorrow the first children come," he said. "The school is ready." "Thanks to your help," Rebecca replied warmly. "There is something else I must ask," he continued. "Something about the future." Rebecca's heart quickened as she invited him inside, sensing that whatever came next would shape the path of both their lives. 1 year later, the school stood as a testament to perseverance and vision. Its stone walls had weathered their first winter. Its small bell tower, Rebecca's one concession to Eastern architectural tradition, called children from both worlds to learning each morning. Today, however, the school stood empty. The entire community had gathered instead at the sacred clearing half a mile away, where centuries-old junipers formed a natural cathedral beneath the vast Arizona sky. Rebecca waited at the edge of the clearing, her heart racing with anticipation. She wore a dress of soft buckskin, lovingly crafted by the women of the tribe, adorned with intricate beadwork that told the story of her journey from lost teacher to found purpose. Her chestnut hair, longer now and lightened by the desert sun, was braided with flowers and feathers according to Apache tradition. "Nervous?" Emily asked, adjusting the ceremonial sash at Rebecca's waist. Her sister had arrived from Boston 2 weeks earlier, initially shocked by Rebecca's transformed life, but quickly won over by the beauty of the land and the dignity of its people. "Not nervous," Rebecca replied, "just aware of the significance." "A union between worlds," Emily mused. "Mother would have apoplexy." Rebecca laughed softly, "which is precisely why we didn't tell her the details in my letters." The ceremonial drums began, their deep rhythm pulsing through the earth beneath her feet. Emily squeezed her hand once before moving to join the gathered witnesses. Rebecca stepped into the clearing alone, moving with measured steps toward the center where Koa-Tay waited. He stood tall and proud, his ceremonial attire marking him as a respected warrior, the eagle feather in his hair catching the golden light of late afternoon. Their eyes met across the diminishing distance, and Rebecca felt the same spark that had first kindled during those desperate days of survival and discovery. What had begun as cautious necessity had blossomed into profound understanding, and finally into love that transcended the boundaries of their different worlds. Chief Nilchi stood between them, his age-lined face solemn yet pleased as he conducted the ceremony in both Apache and English. From a beautifully woven basket, he withdrew a wedding blanket, its intricate pattern telling the story of 2 rivers joining to form one stronger current. As this blanket wraps around 2 bodies to create one warmth, he intoned, "So may your lives join to create one future." Together, Rebecca and Koa-Tay accepted the blanket, wrapping it around their shoulders as they turned to face their community. Apache and settler standing side by side, children from both worlds watching with bright, curious eyes. Among the witnesses stood Agent Thompson, whose support had been instrumental in implementing the treaty and establishing the school. Beside him, the porters beamed with satisfaction at the fulfillment of their long-held dream of peaceful coexistence. Even a few officers from Fort Whipple had come, their presence a cautious acknowledgement of changing times. As the ceremony concluded, the community moved toward the tables laden with food from both cultures, venison and beef, corn cakes and biscuits, wild berries and preserved fruits. Children darted between adults, already embodying the integration their elders were still learning to navigate. Later, as twilight softened the landscape, Rebecca found a quiet moment to withdraw the journal that had accompanied her since Boston. Its pages chronicled an extraordinary journey, from the proper young woman who left her parents' home to the confident teacher and bridge builder she had become. She wrote one final entry, May 15th, 1886, 1 year since I first set eyes on this wild, beautiful country. Today I married a man once considered my enemy, surrounded by a community that has become my family. The small school we built together now teaches 23 children. Yesterday, Sarah, the little girl we rescued, read her first full sentence in both English and Apache. Koa-Tay helps me teach tracking and natural history, while I focus on reading, writing, and mathematics. Together, we are creating something unprecedented, a place where understanding grows alongside knowledge. Asterisk. I came west seeking purpose as a teacher. I found that and so much more. A home, a love, a future I could never have imagined from my sheltered Boston existence. Asterisk. Tomorrow begins our shared life. I close this journal with a full heart and open eyes, grateful for the stagecoach attack that threw me into the unknown and for the warrior who found me there. Asterisk. As she finished writing, Koa-Tay approached, now dressed in simpler attire but no less magnificent in her eyes. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, and when she looked up, she noticed something unexpected. His other hand rested protectively over her abdomen, where the first subtle swell of new life was beginning to show. Our child will know both worlds, he said softly. Rebecca covered his hand with her own, and will be stronger for it. In the distance, children's laughter rose on the evening air as Apache and settler young ones played together beneath the deepening indigo sky, living proof that what had begun with a lost teacher and a fierce warrior could indeed transform the future, one child at a time.